We're now live. Sweet. Thank you all for being here. This is probably one of the larger in-person crowds that I've had personally, so it means a lot to me. We'll love to hear after the fact how you heard about the workshop and why you're here. But yeah, I wanted to just introduce myself before we get started. Thank you all for joining. For those who are watching online, we have a couple people in the room, so I'll be talking to you and to them. My name is Carolyn. I've been working here at SHAG about 2 years. I have my master's in gender studies and focus a lot on relationships and sexual health, reproductive health, wellness, in my personal life, but also professionally. So it's super fun to be working here at SHAG and to be able to provide these educational moments and workshops for our community. We do these every month. This one today is sponsored by Extends. We do, for everyone who's in the room, and for those who are not, we are offering these little goodie bags. We've got some Sex on the Beach organic massage oil that is edible. You all will be going home with these as well. We've got an Extends raspberry water-based organic lube, as well as some more information about our workshops, stickers, etc. So thank you, Extends. Today's workshop is called Walk the Talk. We are focused on communication today. So this is going to be a real overview for anyone who's interested in kind of leveling up and advancing their communication skills, in particular in relationships. So that could be with a very close friend, with your family. That also could be with a partner in a more romantic or sexual context. Not really for the workplace so much, but more, SHAG style based on your relationships interpersonally. So this can be useful for anyone who's single and dating, if you're partnered, if you're polyamorous, if you're monogamous, regardless of your sort of relationship style. If you're wanting to use this with your friends, it's all very useful. So we're going to go over some more kind of relationship-y tools for your toolbox. We're going to look at the Triforce of Communication. If anyone has heard of that, I would be curious. No. Some intentional check-ins and some ways you can structure checking in with folks you love, as well as some kind of key communication tips for kink and play or sexy scenes as well. Some of that we have gone over more in depth in more of our kink-focused workshops that you can watch back on our Instagram, but I will highlight some of the things from that as well. So, first thing I want to say is that tools are only useful if you remember to use them. You may have heard some of this before, but if you are not in the habit of kind of recalling some of this for yourself, there's no use. It's like with anything, learning a language, you have to practice it. So the first thing I want you to think about is to visualize what your personal communication toolbox might look like. Is it black and sleek in your mind? Is it lined with velvet? Is it rainbow and covered in stickers and glitter? Get a little creative when you're thinking about what it is. When someone's like, ooh, I don't have this tool in my toolbox, the more that you can actually visualize something that feels good, that excites you about having this toolbox for yourself, the better. So you can actually remember to kind of muscle memory whip it out in a moment of conflict or a moment of intentionality with someone you care about. So that's a little visualization I want you to take home with. Why do this? Why do we care about enhancing our communication? Communication breakdowns often occur when there are mismatched goals within the conversation. So for example, if you have a partner or a friend that thinks that you are seeking support from them or acknowledgement, when really what you're actually looking for is problem solving, it's just a lot of this, a lot of two ships crossing in the night, a lot of crossed wires. Very well-intended folks will try to have conversations or try to communicate through conflict or not conflict, and it just lands amiss. And so these tools that I want to focus on, starting with the Triforce of Communication, is to really help you both get on the same page, or anyone involved get on the same page about what the goal of the conversation and communication is about. So the first in this Triforce, I should also quote, the Triforce of Communication is from Multi-Amory. That's a podcast that is focused on enhanced and alternative ways of having relationships, including polyamory, but not only. They also talk about monogamy and alternative dating. So it's coming from them. And the Triforce number 1 that they've sort of coined is that the goal of Triforce number 1 is to share something to be known. So, and that's it. So let's say on the lighter end, that could include, sharing a story or something about yourself, sharing a joke, an update on your life, just something you want to share to be shared. Or on like a heavier end, you know, maybe you've been in a position where you're struggling with something and you say to a friend or a partner, can I just talk it out with you? I want to actually like hear myself verbalize it and hear, you know, myself speak it through, but I'm not actually wanting validation, reflection, problem solving, anything else. Those are Triforces 2 and 3. So this is really just sharing to be known. If you're on the listening end, which we'll get to at the end, it's super important to ask, what is your goal in sharing? Are you sharing this? Like, you can even stop someone for a moment and be like, hang on a sec, I love that you're sharing with me. Thank you for your vulnerability. Just to be clear, do you just want this to be heard, or do you want anything else from it? Triforce 2 and 3 that I'll get to in a moment. So that's number 1, just sharing to be known. Triforce number 2 is seeking some kind of support or acknowledgement through it. So let's say again, okay, I'm struggling in this situation at work and I'm coming to my partner or my friend about it. That's then sharing, okay, I'm sharing this to be known, and I'm also sharing it because I'm seeking sympathy, empathy, validation, any kind of emotional or psychological support. That is a big one. I would posit that's often what people are looking for. Sometimes it's just the first one, sometimes it's the first and the second, but either way, it's important to ask. Sometimes someone just wants to share something they don't actually want any validation at all, or they don't want to even hear your thoughts on it. So that's number 2. And I could go into examples of these, but I think it's pretty clear so far. Yes? Okay. And then number 3 is seeking advice or problem solving. So this is the biggest one, for my opinion, that people mess up on, is someone is trying to share with you, they're being vulnerable, and it's a really natural instinct to want to fix, to want to help, to want to problem solve. And that is sometimes where we beeline. It's like, oh, I'm having this trouble, and you care about the person, you want to just offer some advice. Or maybe you've had the same exact experience, and so you believe that it would be valuable to them to share your own lived experience. All of those things have a time and place, but the most important thing is getting consent from the person on what they're actually looking for. So again, asking, do you want just validation? Number 1. Do you want, do you want it just to be known? That's number 1. Do you want the validation or support? Number 2. Or number 3, do you want to actually workshop this? Do you want my thoughts on this? Do you want my lived experience? What are you looking for? And I'll say also, as the person, like as the listener, sometimes people don't know. Sometimes you don't know. You just are kind of starting, maybe you're in like a real acute moment, you don't actually know what you're looking for. That can be frustrating, but that's also okay. It's really important as the listener to keep these 3 things in mind when you're hearing someone disclose to you, so you can at least empower them, if they're able to answer and give you that clear feedback, so you know how you can best serve them. Again, not always possible, but it's a really great tool to have. So that's the Triforce. I'm going to pause here. If you have any questions, I will leave this open. We've discussed as a class here that we'll discuss questions at the end, but feel free to put anything in the group. Number 2 is intentional check-ins. So this is, has anyone heard, you can just raise your hand, you don't have to speak, but heard of the term Scrum? Is anyone Agile Scrum in software development? Okay, I'm seeing some nods. State of the Union in politics. People are familiar with the State of the Union. Or radar, that's the more niche term for multi-amory. Okay, so those are the 3. These are essentially like labels or ways of structuring an intentional check-in, typically in a romantic partnership. Could be just sexual, could also be a friendship, it's up to you. One thing I've learned a lot in my life and professionalism around communications is that timing is super important. And so actually scheduling out time to have a check-in is a really, really great tool to use, especially if these are like larger topics, conflict, something maybe that's long-term or ongoing, not something that you kind of can or need to process in the day-to-day, but something that's like, let's put it on the shelf for a while, and we're gonna talk next week at 6 o'clock. We don't have anything going on after, we have ample time to check in, etc. So these terms like the State of the Union or Agile Scrum actually comes from software development, and basically a lot of relationship nerds like me were really interested in using tools from the workplace and like in a business setting to problem solve and applying them towards romantic or sexual relationships. The dog is being silly, that's what is happening. For anyone who can't see, thank you, Frankie. This happens once a workshop, at minimum. And the idea is essentially like putting together great minds in a condensed container. So we have from 6 to 8 o'clock to really problem solve this issue. And again, it started out in the workplace, but in a romantic sense, This has been a tool or a suggestion I've heard time and time again that I've also used in my personal life that has worked really brilliantly to schedule at a cadence that works for you and your partner or for you and your friend, whatever, to check in, let's say maybe every month or something like that, on all of the major items that you want to cover on a regular-ish basis. So I can give some examples of what that looks like, but why it's beneficial in this way is that especially if there's like long-term issues or bigger conflict, no one has the spoons or capacity to be tackling these kinds of communication issues all the time. So one of my favorite tools is actually suggesting that people don't engage with their feelings or topics constantly, but instead have this intentional moment where everyone is on the same page about what's happening. You can make sure that you are well fed, that you have slept. You can actually prepare your body to have these more difficult conversations. And not just difficult, also more like exciting ones when you're wanting to be creative and you're wanting to co-create with friends or partners or community. One of the terms that Multiamory uses in terms of making sure that you're ready to have these conversations, they suggest to halt, H-A-L-T. If you are hungry, angry, lonely, tired, they also have now added drunk or horny. Don't have these conversations when you're in that kind of state. So again, that intentionality is really key. A lot of the time, that's not something that we think of. We have feelings right away. We ask, oh, can we talk about this right now? Sometimes that's useful, but also this is another option. So the way that they suggest the structure, and again, it's co-created by every dynamic, every individual relationship, is to set up the meeting, and they use RADAR, R-A-D-A-R, it's a lot of acronyms, but you first essentially review. So if you've done it before, you review from the past. What did we learn from last month to this month? Have there been any notable changes? Maybe you go through your calendar and look at what has happened and review any past action points or things you wanted to touch on. Then you agree upon the agenda. So if you're touching base with a partner, in my life, for example, we've had topics like mental health, physical health, sexual health. How are your friendships doing? How's your family of origin doing? What's going on at work? And it's a lot of these topics that you can ask really intentionally of someone when you've had this check-in. Maybe if this is a partner that's like really integrated into your life, you might feel like you kind of know the answers already, but I would challenge that. If you've ever been with a partner or a friend and like been in a new social environment and someone has maybe asked your partner like, hey, how are things with your brother? I haven't heard you mention them in a while. They may give an answer that actually really surprises you, because I think a lot of the time in these relationships we can take for granted that you do know a lot about each other, close friends, partners, etc. So having this intentional time to really ask specifically of this person, like, how are these things going for you individually? And then, if it's appropriate, also, like, how is our relationship going? And breaking it down by whatever topics make sense for you. Finances, sex, sleep, like dog and childcare, whatever makes sense for you, you can really co-create it. And then the D, you discuss. A, come up with any sort of action points for the next time. Maybe in those conversations you've agreed upon a few things you want to look at next month but not solve for today. And then R is reconnect. So after you've kind of had this big experience, how do you want to appreciate each other? If it's a romantic or sexual relationship, do you want a massage? Do you want to cuddle? Maybe you want to do some fun activity together, give each other compliments. These can be kind of intense, like raw discussions. So making sure to end on more of like a positive, connected note is very important. So that's the second one. And then the third topic to discuss was around like kink and play settings. So this is a little bit of a pivot, but some of these may sound kind of rudimentary to some of you. I don't know where you are in like your journey with relationships and sex and kink, but just to kind of go over some of the major communication 101 pieces that are needed in any kind of kink or play scene. From the most vanilla to the most kinky, it doesn't matter, in my opinion. They all have kind of the same underpinning. The first is discussing expectations. So on a more like fun note, what are your intentions, desires, wishes? And if you're sitting there or hearing this and being like, well, I don't know, like I just kind of am into this person and I want to play with them or I want to do a kink scene with them, but I don't know what my desires are, that's okay, but then that really needs to be communicated as well. And I would encourage you to do a little bit of internal work before you're in that setting to actually have something more concrete to offer. Because I think where things get really tricky sometimes and a little gray, which is a no, is if you're not actually sure or clear in yourself what you're wanting out of this dynamic. So that's the first. is really, getting clear on that curiosity, like what excites you mentally, psychologically, physically, sexually, and kind of starting there. In most of these workshops, if any of you have been to mine before, I kind of sneak in a Harry Potter quote every time, and Ron Weasley says, follow the butterflies. And I would agree. Follow your own internal butterflies. What is feeling good to you, even if it's really weird, that's great, we love that. Even if it's something really like as small as like, I really want you to whisper in my ear. Like, it doesn't have to be some grandiose, creative, scene that you've come up with, but one way of connecting or exploring sexually, or romantically, or whatever the setting calls for. So expressing those, and if there's multiple people involved, how much, if any, of that aligns, how much of any of that is compatible. The stuff that's not, obviously, not for today. Which leads into some of the harder conversations around hard limits. So anything that's a maybe is a no, right? Are we all in agreement about that? Anything that is a no is a no. If there's maybe, if there's hesitation, if there's a question mark, that's not enthusiastic consent. So we're going to say no on that. Just want to be very clear. Anything that's like, ooh, I'm kind of curious about it, but it's not a today thing, we're going to say that's off the table, but maybe in the cabinet. So like, well, let's look at it later. Maybe we can pull it out and put it back on the table next time, but it's not for today. And really getting clear on like owning your yeses, owning your nos, being clear that if it's a maybe, it's a no. Like, that is all internal work that is not really something you can do for anyone else. You have to be able to do that yourself, and that is what is like the greatest part about these kind of communication tools is like, once you're able to own your yeses and nos so enthusiastically, you're gonna have the most pleasure in your life across the board, not just in the bedroom. Then agreements, so as we're talking about in this workshop, the agreement I have with all of you is that yes means yes, no means no, and maybe means no. Same deal with like any kind of safety words. In a lot of sort of kink and like non-monogamous environments, sex-positive environments, there's red, yellow, and green. Are people familiar with that? So for those who aren't, if you're in a scene, having the agreement that red means stop, the scene is completely coming to a halt, or whatever play is happening is coming to a halt. Yellow means slow down, or oh, we need to check in. Usually if I hear a yellow, that's actually, for me, like oh, let's stop and just recalibrate. And then a green is more, keep going, let's continue with this. So using that sort of stoplight as well. Those are some, you could use whatever words you want, but those are some kind of agreements in communication that it's really good to align on before anything begins. And then lastly, because I want to be mindful of time, is just about aftercare. So we've talked a lot about aftercare in other workshops, but just to note, communication doesn't always have to be verbal. Aftercare can be a really beautiful way to communicate with someone that you care at its most basic level. So if it's a kink scene, that might be like tending to wounds, regardless of if it's a kink scene or not, if it's just play, like making sure people are hydrated, checking in on feelings. How did that feel for you? Was there anything a little off? Was there anything that went really well? Like, just getting comfortable with that kind of feedback and conversing is going to normalize that process at the beginning and end and during every time. So other examples in terms of like tending to wounds or anything physical and water, talking about the experience, sometimes people get really hungry or maybe like have low blood pressure or low blood sugar after a play scene. That happens a lot. Making sure there are snacks. Do people want cuddles? Do people want space? Soothing your senses, maybe washing your hands. So any of that kind of like nonverbal communication can also be really powerful for partners and for yourself. What do you need? And being able to communicate that too. So I'm gonna pause there because that was a lot of information. I do want to just mention that here at SHAG, we have a vast library of books for those who can see and for those who are in the room, where I'm pulling a lot of this information from. One of my favorites is Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski. I did a whole workshop on her, I think last year in May, called Hey Diddle Diddle, about pleasure-centered context. That's an awesome book. She also has a lot of podcasts. It's really helping people get to that kind of core truth, like following the butterflies, figuring out what it is for you that feels really, really good, and then helping you communicate that as well. There's some like worksheets, and she has a workbook as well. So that's a great one. We have her at SHAG. Polysecure, we're trying to get on our shelves soon too. That's another awesome one about, communication and attachment styles and relationships that focuses more on polyamory, but is honestly useful for any type of relationship style. And then we have a lot of books here. I don't know if we'll get flagged, but Un-F Word is the title. We have a bunch of them here. And they have some on, boundaries and like communication styles and different sort of templates and workbooks that can help you understand your sort of desires and inner truths a bit more, and then therefore be able to communicate them with loved ones and cared ones in your life. So I will pause here. We have other resources here, so come, for anyone who's not in the shop, come chat with us. We're all super nerdy and love talking about these things, so if you have questions, come on by or DM us on Instagram. But you all stay, I will pause this here. Oh yeah, and also, thank you. Well, you're all getting the little goodie bags from Extends. For anyone who's watching this, if you've made it to the end, you get a 10% discount code on our website, weloveshag.com, through this Sunday. I think it's the 17th or 18th, but you'll know if you're watching. And the discount is WalkTalk23. So thank you for listening, and thank you for the reminder. All right.